Shedeur Sanders, villain or victim? Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by for the very best in discussion, debate, and analysis. And I got to say, this is one intriguing narrative. I typically stay away from these kind of dramas, but Shedeur Sanders has so many acts in this play. It's unbelievable. And he's only 20-some years old. More to come, I'm sure. I.e. Johnny Manziel, Tim Tebow. You could throw all these guys together, and it doesn't equal the plot lines that we currently have for one Shedeur Sanders. And the guy that's mostly steering the ship, that's one Deion Sanders, of course. All right, let's get to the pinnacle of the hijinks, and that's, of course, the prank phone call that came in to Shedeur Sanders as he was plummeting down the ranks of the first round into the second round at this point. Other quarterbacks had been taken, including Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart, in which the New York Giants traded up into late in the first round. And many thought that they were going after Shedeur Sanders, but it happened to be one Jackson Dart. So at this point in the draft, you've probably seen the clip. If you haven't, there it is right there. A young man with an Ole Miss shirt on who, this just came across my newsfeed, has been identified as Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Albrecht's son, pulled a prank on Shedeur Sanders. He basically called and pretended to be New Orleans general manager Mickey Loomis, and that they were just about ready to end the nightmare for Shedeur Sanders in the second round and select him to the New Orleans Saints. Apparently one of those teams that Deion Sanders approved, his legendary son. And if you are the average American football fan, Shedeur Sanders hasn't exactly endeared himself to you with all the arrogance and all the punk-related moves that he has made. So let's just go from this punk move that I'm sure a lot of people got a lot of belly laughs from, and I get it, but this was a punk move by that kid. Now he's a young punk, and hopefully he'll learn better and be held accountable and won't do those kind of horrific, horrible things, despicable things to other human beings. But that's sometimes the way the world works. You treat others in a manner, and then it's going to come back at you. And that's, I'm sure, how this is being viewed by most. I view it as a despicable thing to do, but again, by a kid, and hopefully he'll be a better human being as he matures. Let's get back to the maturity of one Shedeur Sanders and what happened in this whole situation. Well, let's take it back. There are so many things to go through here. Let's go back to his first season starting, going from Jackson State to Colorado. And he showed himself to be an extremely talented quarterback at the collegiate level, playing for a bad football team with a bad offensive line, putting up big numbers, albeit few wins in a 4-8 season. Parlay that and give Deion Sanders a ton of credit. Sticking at Colorado, building a football team, albeit a mercenary team to a certain extent, but that's the way things are done in college football in the 2020s. Bringing in the transfers and loading up with Travis Hunter, the best player, and who was, of course, selected with the number 2 pick in the NFL draft. But Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, of course, the headliners for a team that went 9-4. So a great climb by this Colorado football team. So Shedeur Sanders played himself into the Heisman talk, played himself into the high NFL selection talk as well with his play on the field, which was exemplary. But there's a difference between collegiate football star at quarterback and NFL prospect. This is where the disconnect comes into play because many believe Shedeur Sanders would be a top 5 to 10 pick in the NFL, and Deion Sanders trumpeted that anywhere that he could find a microphone. He was talking about how high his son was going to be drafted. In addition to Travis Hunter, most famously said it a number of times, top 4. These are 2 of the top 4 players in America. And there was one particular clip I saw here in the last few days in which a host had the gall to say maybe that Shedeur Sanders would drop to number 9 in the draft to the New Orleans Saints, and Deion just laughed at him. Deion Sanders obviously had the gall and the arrogance and the entitlement, and this has been passed down to his son, to basically say, we're going to choose a la Eli Manning, and I did not like that at the time either. We're going to choose where we are going to play. Okay, it is a privilege to play in the NFL. It is a privilege to play at the highest level, professional football, be paid a lot of money to play a child's game and not truly have to work and to do what you love. Yes, it is work. But I see the NFL as a complete organization. These are not individual organizations. The NFL is the large company. They're the corporation. And getting drafted is getting drafted into the NFL. And then you are sent to your league office. You're sent to Buffalo, Los Angeles, Denver, Jacksonville, wherever it may be. And that's what you got to live with. And 99.9% of the athletes that are drafted, they live with the consequences of being sent wherever they're going to be sent by the home office. But Shedeur Sanders was going to be the first guy that I can think of in 20 years, and his father, that were going to say, nope, not playing here, here, and there. And really, this is in much correlation to the situation with Nico Iamaleava and his father being unaware of the marketplace. Deion Sanders was not aware of the marketplace, and he basically boxed his son into a bad place. And his son acted like a jackass, apparently, in these interviews with NFL general managers and player personnel directors. One, in fact, actually several had stated to some degree, this is the worst interview we've ever seen. And he's not playing cornerback or guard. He's in the leadership position in sports, especially in this sport. And you got to show yourself to be a leader, to be tough, to be humble, to have all the confidence and the swag, but also to balance that with humility and a servant attitude and a team first aspect. Not a Johnny Manziel type aspect when you're asked, what are you going to do after you get drafted? And you say, I'm going to Vegas and party all night. No, the attitude and the perspective that you respond like Peyton Manning, who was asked once he was drafted number 1 in the NFL draft, what are you going to do? I'm getting ready to work. I'm watching film. I can't wait to get to Indianapolis and get to work. That's who you're expected to be. Shedeur Sanders, apparently, we didn't see the interviews, but apparently across the board looked like an immature, entitled jerk. And that's the way he came across. Why did he plummet this far in the draft? He's better than this. He's better than a 5th rounder. That doesn't mean he's going to succeed as an NFL quarterback. That is not necessarily my prediction. I do not have a prediction about how successful he's going to be as a player. Do I believe that he's got skills and talent? Absolutely, he does. He was better than a lot of the quarterbacks that were selected behind him. Namely, on the same team, the anti-Shedeur Sanders is one Dylan Gabriel. The guy without the big arm, without the hype and the hoopla, who just showed up and did his job and was just a first-class quarterback at 3 big schools in UCF, Oklahoma, and Oregon. Dylan Gabriel, 100 years old, the anti-Shedeur Sanders, and it's funny that these two guys get drafted. And I do think that the Cleveland Browns actually made a wise selection here, they made a boomer bust selection, but you really can't bust in the 5th round because those guys aren't expected to become starters in the NFL. So why not take a shot? Because if Shedeur Sanders plays up to his reasonable, legitimate draft status, his legitimate draft evaluation, if he plays like a late 1st rounder, 2nd rounder at quarterback and gets his shot and applies himself, grows up, maybe gets knocked around a little bit and grows up, maybe detaches a little bit from daddy, doesn't allow his father to become an issue, and that's one of the big reasons why he fell as well. I think it became a perfect storm. That number one, the media got it wrong. He wasn't evaluated that highly by NFL scouts. So that was the first thing. The media either was unaware and blind, or they cared too much about clicks. And so they told all of us that Shedeur Sanders was being that highly touted because they wanted the clicks. It's almost like the recruiting magazines, and they make certain projections and make certain moves to sell more magazines, that the media was doing this, and they were keeping a deaf ear to what they were being told by personnel directors until all the bad interviews came out, and then they took advantage of dissing Shedeur Sanders because of that, because that brought the clicks. So it could have been a combination of the media was way off in what they were telling us about what the true evaluation was. Number two, the bad interviews. It's the quarterback position. Who wants to be part of that? Number three, look at his dad. We just saw it. We just lived it in college football with Nico and his entitled, arrogant jerk of a dad who put his son in a bad position by overselling him, overvaluing him. Deion Sanders did the same thing with Shedeur Sanders. What NFL club wants to deal with that? What general manager wants to deal with a guy who, hey, is one of the greatest NFL players of all time and is doing a great job as the head coach at Colorado, but who is going to be in your ear all the time about how you're handling his son, that his son should be starting, that his son needs weapons, that his son needs this or that. Forget it. And then on top of that, just think about the media attention this is going to bring in a negative way to this organization, which is already the worst, arguably, in professional sports. Cleveland Browns has been arguably the least successful in the last 25 years. That you're going to bring this big distraction as they go through minicamp and OTAs, that the players are going to be asked, first and foremost, the first, second, and third questions are all going to be about not the offense and the defense or your own personal development, but it's going to be Shedeur Sanders. Does he get along with you? Does he get along with the team? How's he making out? What do you think? It's the circus of Deion Sanders. And the circus is fun. The circus is interesting. The circus draws attention, but the circus also distracts from winning and losing. Mel Kiper ranks Shedeur Sanders, and I love Mel Kiper. I'm not going to vouch for his current ability in properly evaluating college football players, but from an all-time perspective of him building the industry and him being the forerunner, the pioneer of this cottage industry, I love Mel Kiper, but that has nothing to do with his current ability to rank and evaluate and rate players. He had Shedeur Sanders as the fifth best player on the board, and he was all up in arms, especially when Pittsburgh, who basically has no quarterbacks, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they picked at number 21, they went another way. They didn't even select a quarterback until a lot lower, Will Howard, national championship quarterback at Ohio State, but couldn't believe it. Pittsburgh, no quarterbacks. Mason Rudolph is their quarterback right now, basically, and they even passed on Shedeur Sanders. So I think a lot of things factored in. Again, media unawareness or agenda, Deion dragging him down. Then once a player starts to fall, there are going to be runs on other players. And if you're a quarterback, that's not a good place to be because there's only one guy that plays. If you're an offensive lineman, well, we need more offensive linemen. We need more defensive linemen. We need all sorts of cornerbacks and slot cornerbacks to cover all these receivers. We need multiple waves of players at all these other positions. But at quarterback, I think there were probably a lot of ties for Shedeur Sanders on down the line that he lost. He lost the tie because, hey, you're a quarterback. We don't need you. And you're a pain in the rear end, and your dad's a pain in the rear end, and we'll just move on. So is he a true fifth-round pick? No, he's much better than that. Much better than that. So if the Cleveland Browns are right, this is an all-time great pick. And earlier in the draft, obviously, the Browns made logistically a great selection by trading down 3 spots, picking up the second-round pick this year, and then picking up the number 1 pick for Jacksonville next year in exchange for that position in which Travis Hunter went to Jacksonville, even though if I'm the Browns, I stay put and get Travis Hunter. But let's not veer off of Shedeur Sanders and anything else I wanted to say about this deal. This is the same guy in Deion Sanders that retired his number at Colorado. Was that justified? Probably not. Travis Hunter, yes, one of the great athletes in the history of the sport and a Heisman Trophy winner. Shedeur Sanders, yeah, he was great. He was a really good quarterback, one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in college football this past year. But retiring his number, it's just too much. It's just too much. People get sick of it. Did you see his room, his little draft room? Or maybe this is his house. I don't know what the deal is. I just saw a panoramic of his room and the whole legendary and his number 2 with the dollar sign. And, it's just a bit much. People don't want to see that. People don't want to hear about it. Do something first. Go to work. Put your head down. Grind. Go to work, listen to your teammates. Deion Sanders was overheard making some kind of crack about Joe Flacco with the Cleveland Browns. Joe Flacco, if your son accomplishes half of what Joe Flacco has done in the NFL, he will have a great career. Win a Super Bowl like Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco will probably grind your son into the ground and he'll beat him in a direct quarterback battle and win the job at a zillion years old. So don't make fun of Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is an accomplished quarterback in the NFL, even up until last year. Jalen Milroe was selected ahead of Shedeur Sanders. Do I agree with that? No. Jalen Milroe was lost last year, clueless, but he's an athlete. You can do some things with him, and a lot of offensive-minded coaches believe that they can take any bit of clay and they can mold it into a superstar. And Jalen Milroe's got the body, he's got the speed, he's got the arm strength to be something special if he could ever put it together and ever figure out the game up here. And then again, Dylan Gabriel, the anti-Shedeur Sanders, it's funny that they're going to be in the same camp, unless there's a trade mate, going to be in the same camp competing behind Joe Flacco. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Please leave your like, your subscriber status, of course, get that squared away. It doesn't cost you a penny. And then, of course, leave those comments down below. Shedeur Sanders, villain or victim? Victim in regards to the prank, victim in regards to his draft status. Did he earn better? Villain, I could go on for another few hours. I think I just covered that ground. Appreciate you being here. See you next time.